Hey guys, Matthew here. In this video, I want to talk to you about these global illuminations options around primary rays and secondary rays, and kinds of algorithms you should be choosing here. Now, there's a lot of information about this, but the fundamental way that a rendering engine works is that it shoots rays out of the camera and then decides what color each pixel should be. These rays are allowed to bounce around in particular ways, and there's different algorithms that you can use to do this. Now, traditionally, a brute force algorithm is quite slow, but will eventually work. It'll be very, very time consuming. So these other options are usually far better. And I'm going to preference here the irradiance map option. And I'm also going to, in the secondary rays, choose between light cache or brute force. Personally, I prefer to use light cache for interior shots and brute force for exterior shots, but that's a personal choice. Now, I'm going to set this to light cache for just one moment, because as we go up to ray trace, you'll notice that this quality tab actually controls a couple of things here. It controls a noise limit and something called subdivs in the ray trace option. And then in the global illumination options, it controls the subdivs and the settings here as well. So fundamentally, the majority of work being done by a rendering engine is here in these ray tracing options, and then here in these ray tracing options here. So we'll get back to this basic ray tracer thing up here in a moment, but you'll notice that there's a min rate and a max rate, a subdivs option, and an interpolation. Now, there's far better videos about what these things mean than I have time to do here. But if you are finding that your scene is noisy or blurry, bashing these things up will increase the quality of the image. That's just generally how it works. So if you don't want to render out a very high quality image because it'll take so much time to do, you can actually begin to say, I'm going to actually increase the subdivs, which is kind of another kind of phrase for the number of rays that are being spat out. The min rate and the max rate is a way to actually cull some of the rays you're sending out because some of them might not be necessary. So if we go to brute force, you'll notice that this setting just has a GI depth, and as I increase it, it stays static. So if I brute force the last step, I know that it's like I'm going to just be working with a GI depth of 3. So if I up this to something much, much larger, I'll get a much better image. I'm not going to do 100 because that seems a bit crazy. So what if I do 75 and I will up this to 1? So I'm sending out far more rays and with a high, better quality. And I'm going to just press render. And we're back, and you'll notice that the image we have is not physically that much different when we're looking at it. So if I zoom in, there's a fair bit of noise here, and there's not so much noise on this one. But the biggest kind of puzzling thing is that, you know, those simple changes have moved this from a render that takes 2 minutes and 55 seconds to a render that takes 20 minutes and 7.2 seconds. So it's really powerful, it's really useful. However, you get a lot of render time added to making those ray trace corrections in the global illumination settings. So I changed this to a max rate of 1 and this to subdivs of 75. And if I go back to medium, the setting is 50, minus 1, minus 3. If I go to high, minus 3, minus 1, 70, minus 3, 0, 90. So adding this to an extra 1 is higher than very high. So if I just put this to high and gave it another render, and we're back, and you'll notice that the high settings actually give a render time of 6 minutes and 35.7 seconds. So this min rate and max rate, which has a lot to do with the actual adaptive sampling to decide out how many rays will actually be pushed out from the subdiv list, has a massive effect on render time. So be very, very gentle in correcting those kind of elements. And if we have a look at the light cache option, it also runs off a subdiv system. And that's it for the global illumination settings on the ray tracing. So if we have a look at the actual difference between the two images, you know, one being 6 minutes and the other one being 20, you'll notice that, yeah, there's a different amount of noise in each one. And actually the one with 20 minutes seems to have more noise than the one in 6 minutes. But you're spending 14 minutes waiting for something with a really, really marginal difference that could probably be cleaned up with the denoise function. So be really intelligent about how long you wait for a render. And these problems become a lot more prevalent when we're dealing with much larger images for print. So because currently when we look at our render output, this image is only 300 pixels by 900 pixels. If I was wanting to print this out, it would be a much bigger render. So these numbers get exponentially larger. So that's it for this video, and I'll see you in the next one.